There is a silent thief that lives within nearly every human heart. It does not kick down the door like anger, nor announce itself proudly like ambition. It lingers in quiet corners, watching others with narrowed eyes and clenched breath. Its voice is not loud, but it is corrosive, and it asks only one question: why not me? Jealousy is rarely admitted in polite conversation. We mask it beneath jokes, comparisons, or even moral outrage. We mock the wealthy, critique the beautiful, or dismiss the successful, but deep inside, envy whispers its poison, that someone else has stolen a life that should have been ours. That someone is living our version of joy. And the more we compare, the more the soul shrinks under the weight of perceived injustice. But the Stoics, ever clear-eyed and unsentimental, saw jealousy not as a moral failure to be condemned, but as a signal, a flare, a warning, a symptom. For Epictetus, jealousy was not just an emotion, it was a judgment. A judgment that what another has is good, and that we are deprived. And this misjudgment, this warped view of value, is where the real suffering begins. You do not envy a monk with no possessions. You do not burn with jealousy over the peace of a homeless man who has made his peace with loss. You envy only those whom society has taught you to envy. The curated lives on screens, the colleague promoted before you, the friend who glows with ease while you wrestle with your own inadequacy. Envy, the Stoics would say, is not about the other, it is always about you. It reveals what you think matters. It unmasks your hidden hierarchy of values. And if it hurts, it's because something inside you has agreed with a false premise that the good life can be measured externally. Seneca warned that no man is made happy by the success of another. He did not mean that others' joy should cause us pain, only that using someone else's path to measure our own will always lead to suffering. Because the one thing you lack, the praise, the body, the money, the ease, seems enormous only because your eye is on it. But look elsewhere, and you will see what they lack. You will notice the cost they pay. You will understand that life, in every form, carries a hidden tax. The Stoics would tell you this, that the proper response to envy is examination, not shame. Jealousy is not something to suppress, but to study. When you feel its bitter sting, stop, look inward. Ask, what did I just assume was necessary? What belief did this feeling expose? Because behind every flash of envy is an opportunity to reorder your soul. Imagine walking through a grand house, marble floors, vaulted ceilings, rich art on the walls. Your heart aches with longing. But then you learn the owner cannot sleep, is tormented by lawsuits, mistrusts his friends, and despises his children. Suddenly, the gold glitters less brightly. Suddenly, your small apartment with quiet mornings and sincere relationships gleams with a new light. This is the Stoic reversal, the willingness to inspect the whole picture, not just the surface. To pierce the illusion of other people's lives and to recalibrate your own idea of what is worth wanting. Jealousy thrives on incompleteness, on snapshots and appearances. But a Stoic does not trust appearances. A Stoic digs, questions, strips away. For Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who had every cause to be envied, the cure for envy was clarity. How much trouble he avoids, who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does or thinks, but only to what he does himself, that it may be just and pure. In a world of constant comparison, where attention is currency and projection is armor, the Stoic learns to disengage from the theater of status, not out of laziness but out of freedom. To say, I do not need what they have, because I do not want what they want. That is the truest liberation. And it begins with this uncomfortable truth, that envy is not about what is out there, it is about what is unresolved in here. So let it teach you. Let the feeling that burns in your chest become a fire that reveals the architecture of your hidden values. Let it show you where you have placed your peace in someone else's hands. And then, with calm, with honesty, take it back, not by chasing what they have, but by remembering what no one can take from you, your reasoned choice, your dignity, your capacity for virtue. That is the only treasure the Stoics ever envied, and it is already yours. The power of my nocid, to idul. There's a hidden cruelty in envy that often goes unnoticed, not just in how it wounds the one who envies, but in how it silently dehumanizes the person envied. When you envy someone, you do not see them clearly. You reduce them to a possession, a list of attributes, a role in your internal theater of inadequacy. Their full humanity disappears, replaced by your projection. And once you do that, once you turn a person into an object, you begin to suffer twice, first through comparison, then through distortion. The Stoics believed that this kind of mental corruption was more dangerous than any physical injury. For Marcus Aurelius, the true battlefield was the soul. And envy, though quiet, is an invader. It sows discontent not by force but by suggestion. It whispers that you are incomplete, that someone else's joy is a threat to your own, that life is a game with limited prizes, and that you are falling behind. And if you are not careful, if you do not question this voice, you start to believe it. You start to see others not as companions on the same journey, but as obstacles, as rivals, as reflections of your own failure. But a Stoic sees through this. A Stoic does not accept envy as truth. He investigates it. He breaks it down. He examines its parts and finds at the core a falsehood, that value can be externally acquired and that joy must come from the outside in. But the Stoic rejects this entire premise. He knows that envy is not the result of reality, but of perception. And perception, the Stoics teach, is within your control. Take Epictetus. Born a slave, crippled in body, owning nothing, yet envying no one. Not because he was superhuman, but because he had trained his judgment. He understood what most modern minds forget, that nothing external can truly improve or diminish you without your consent. If someone else's success ruins your peace, it is not because they took something from you. It is because you gave away your serenity. So when envy stirs in you, that sharp pang in the gut, when you see someone excel where you struggle, the Stoic response is not to suppress it, nor to indulge it. It is to interrogate it. What belief did this feeling arise from? Do you think you are less because they are more? Do you believe that your path is invalidated by their achievement? If so, then you must ask yourself, were you ever on your own path to begin with? Or were you simply running their race? Jealousy often points to misalignment. It shows where you have adopted values that are not truly yours. You envy the wealthy not because you want to be rich, but because somewhere along the line you were taught that money is proof of worth. You envy the beautiful not because you despise your body, but because you were conditioned to believe that beauty equals love, or attention, or power. These are not natural desires, they are inherited distortions, and the Stoic path is one of correction. Correction does not mean retreat. It does not mean renouncing ambition or refusing all pleasures. It means becoming sovereign over what you pursue, to want things not because others want them, but because you have examined them and found them worthy of your time, your energy, your life. And most importantly, it means remembering that the only comparison that matters is between who you were yesterday and who you are becoming today. There is a strange kind of freedom that emerges when you stop measuring yourself against others. It is not apathy. It is not surrender. It is clarity. You stop needing to prove your value because you recognize that it has never depended on external markers. And when that happens, when you are no longer held hostage by the success of others, something else emerges: joy for their joy, gratitude for their light, even if you still walk in shadow. This is not easy. It takes practice. It takes an ego willing to be dismantled and rebuilt on firmer ground. But it is possible. The Stoics were not abstract thinkers lost in ivory towers. They were soldiers, slaves, emperors, parents, teachers. They lived in chaos, in political violence, in personal loss. And still they held firm to this truth, that a man who knows his own values cannot be ruled by the triumphs of others. So next time jealousy comes, welcome it, not as an enemy, but as a messenger. Let it teach you. Let it show you where you are still chained. And then, slowly, deliberately, break that chain. Not by becoming more like those you envy, but by becoming more like the person you were meant to be before the world told you who you should envy. This is the Stoic cure. Not denial, not comparison, but the radical act of value reconstruction. To look within and say what truly matters to me and why. And then to live that truth, undisturbed by the lives of others, steady in your own pursuit of virtue. That is where freedom begins. There comes a moment in every life when envy becomes unbearable, not because someone else has triumphed, but because you realize how long you've delayed your own becoming. You're not just jealous of their success, you're grieving your stagnation. And that's when the pain sharpens. That's when the bitterness bites deepest. Not because their gain is your loss, but because their movement is a mirror reflecting your stillness. But the Stoics would stop you right there. They would say, good, let the pain speak, let it sting, because unlike resentment which poisons, this kind of envy can become fuel if you use it correctly, if you let it become a mirror, not a prison. And there it is, the central discipline of Stoicism, to reclaim your mind from the outside world, from its illusions, from its competitions, from its noise, and most of all from its comparisons. You are not running their race. You were not born to meet their milestones, and you are not measured by their applause. But the longer you stare at another's path, the more blind you become to your own. Envy doesn't just steal peace, it steals direction. So what does the Stoic do when faced with this temptation to compare, to compete, to covet? He pauses. He returns to first principles. He strips the scene down like peeling away layers of theatrical makeup until the actor's real face is revealed. Someone receives praise. Someone earns wealth. Someone is desired. Someone is celebrated. And strip it back. Is their success based on virtue or on fortune? Did they cultivate courage, wisdom, justice, temperance? Or were they simply born into beauty, stumbled into opportunity, or mastered the performance of significance? Because the Stoic knows the difference. The Stoic is not dazzled by the glitter of accidents. He is grounded in the glow of character. Seneca, tutor to Nero and no stranger to the politics of appearances, warned that external success without internal virtue is a palace built on sand. It may impress for a time, but it cannot stand. And to envy such a thing is to envy a mirage. You may chase it, but you will never drink from it. This is why envy, when left unchecked, leads not just to misery, but to corruption. It tempts you to forsake your principles in pursuit of someone else's path. It warps your aims. It turns your pursuit of excellence into a scramble for attention, and your effort to grow into a game of image management. You no longer ask what is right, you ask what will make them look at me. But the Stoic refuses this game, because he knows the cost. He knows that the moment your self-worth is outsourced to the reaction of others, you have become their servant. And no amount of praise will ever free you, because now you need it. Now it owns you. So he breaks the cycle. He reminds himself that the only thing truly his is his judgment. And judgment must be trained like a muscle. It must be exercised daily. When envy arises, the Stoic applies reason. He says, this feeling is not about them. It is about my unexamined desire. Let me see what I'm really chasing. And when you look deeply, you will often find that what you envy is not what they have. It's what you think it means. You don't want their life. You want what their life seems to represent: confidence, ease, admiration, freedom. But these things are not bound to circumstance. They are not the byproduct of money or attention or physical form. Well, they are internal. And if they are internal, they are accessible now, through reason, discipline, and reflection. The Stoics believe that virtue is the only good because it is the only thing that cannot be taken from you. All else is borrowed. All else is fleeting. But your character, that is forged by your choices. That is who you are when no one is watching. And it is who you become when you choose to let envy die and let self-respect live. So if you must compare, compare your actions to your principles. Compare your current self to the self you aspire to be. Let others run their race. Let them win it if they must. You have your own ground to cover, and the only thing that can delay you now is the time you waste watching them. To the Stoic, envy is not a flaw. It is a teacher, a signpost pointing to a misalignment between what you say you value and what you secretly crave. And once you see it, clearly, honestly, without excuses, you are free to change. Not to compete, not to prove, but to become. And becoming is the one game where no one else's score matters. It is a quiet but brutal truth. Envy cannot exist in a soul that has made peace with its own path. And yet, how many of us have truly done that? How many can look at another's success without flinching, without spiraling into self-doubt, without feeling the familiar tightening in the chest that says, you should be further along by now? The Stoics knew this tension intimately, the longing, the impatience, the ache for validation. But they also knew the antidote, a ruthless realignment of what truly matters. For envy to take root, it requires fertile ground, a soil made of insecurity, comparison, and misplaced values. But this ground is not given to us. It is built. It is built every time we define our worth by metrics we do not control. Every time we scroll and wish. Every time we use someone else's joy as evidence of our lack. That is the mechanism of modern jealousy. It is not simply the desire for what another has. It is the illusion that you are lesser because of it. But the Stoic reframes that entirely. He does not envy, he inquires. He does not compete, he reflects. Because to the Stoic, nothing is more tragic than abandoning your own calling out of obsession with another's. You were not meant to imitate. You were meant to master yourself. And this mastery begins in silence. There is a passage in Epictetus that few people quote, perhaps because it cuts too deep. He says that when we see someone prosper and we feel pain, it is not because they have succeeded, but because we have failed to remember what success is. You are not harmed, he writes. You have simply forgotten what is yours to control. This is the Stoic root, the dichotomy of control. That razor-sharp division between what belongs to you, your mind, your choices, your effort, and what does not, the praise, the outcomes, the judgments of others. Jealousy collapses this division. It places your peace into the hands of people who do not even know your name. It makes you a spectator of your own life, waiting for approval to begin. And in doing so, it robs you of your agency. But you can reclaim it if you're willing to lose the fantasy. Because make no mistake, envy is built on fantasy, on incomplete stories, on the highlight reels of other people's lives. You see their moment of triumph, not the years of obscurity. You see the applause, not the silence. The followers, not the loneliness. The body, not the discipline. The relationship, not the arguments. And yet your mind, hungry for distraction and validation, tells you the story in reverse. They have something I lack, and I must catch up. But catch up to what? To whom? To which illusion? The Stoic instead turns the gaze inward. He asks, what am I chasing and why? Not with shame, but with sincerity. Because to ask that question honestly is to begin healing. It is to begin detaching from the narratives you were sold and returning to the reality of your own life. And in that reality, what matters is not how you compare, but how you conduct yourself, how you carry the weight of your own fate, how you show up when no one is clapping, how you respond to failure, to fatigue, to unfairness. That is the true battleground. That is where envy loses all its power, when you realize that your dignity is not on the scoreboard. Seneca once wrote that the wise man is content with himself, not because he has no ambition, but because he has no illusion. He does not seek to be better than others, only better than his former self. He does not crave status, only clarity. And in that clarity there is no room for jealousy, because there is nothing to compete for, only virtue to be practiced. The modern mind recoils at this. It says, But if I stop comparing, won't I lose my drive? Won't I fall behind? But behind what? The Stoic would ask. The race you were never meant to run? The ladder that leads to nowhere? There is no falling behind in a life that is lived in alignment. There is only presence or distraction, and envy is the ultimate distraction. It disguises itself as ambition, but it is hollow. It motivates through fear, not purpose. It urges you to outdo, not to understand. But the Stoic sees through this. He asks, what is the cost of this emotion? What is it doing to my peace, my focus, my time? Is it worth it? Usually, it is not. Usually, it is a flame that consumes more than it fuels. And that is why the Stoic does not chase. He cultivates. He does not copy. He creates. He does not resent. He re-centers. And when he sees another shine, he does not recoil. He observes. He appreciates. And if that light reveals something missing in himself, he does not reach outward. He goes inward, because that is where the work is. That is where the real gold lies. And no one, no amount of envy, can steal it once it's found. To the Stoic mind, every emotion is a lesson waiting to be deciphered, and envy is no exception. But unlike fear or grief, envy is trickier. It often hides behind a mask of justice. You begin to tell yourself that your resentment is noble, that you are angry not because someone has more, but because they don't deserve it. This, too, is a lie. A subtle shift of blame to avoid the real work. Because envy always disguises itself as a moral intuition, but at its root lies a spiritual confusion, the inability to distinguish what is yours to govern from what is theirs to bear. Let's say you see someone rewarded for mediocrity, someone admired for traits you deem superficial, someone celebrated in ways that ignore effort or depth. It's easy to feel outrage. It's easy to think, why do they get it so easily while I work in silence? Why is the world blind to real substance? But the Stoics would say, that is not your domain. That is not your assignment. Their reward, and even their delusion, belongs to them. Your work is your own. This is the Stoic defiance, a radical refusal to be moved by unjust rewards or unearned applause. Not because you are apathetic, but because you understand the danger of outsourcing your emotional weather to the winds of society. If your peace can be shattered by someone else's success, then it was never rooted in anything unshakable to begin with. So the Stoic asks, where is my stability? Is it in public opinion, in the pace of my progress compared to others, in some external proof of my worth, or is it in the quiet daily fidelity to my principles? The disciplined return to what I know is good, even when no one else claps for it. Envy vanishes in the face of personal alignment. Not success, not victory, alignment. When your thoughts, actions, and values move in unison, there is no space for someone else's life to disturb your own. You do not crave their path because you are walking yours with full attention. You do not crave their prize because you have already chosen your own reward, the peace of a life lived with integrity. This is what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote, "The tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say, or think, or do. Only what you do." It sounds simple, but it is a kind of internal revolution, because the entire world is designed to train you to do the opposite, to monitor, to compare, to assess your worth by how others see you. It is not easy to resist that pull, but it is necessary if you wish to be free. There's a quiet power in watching someone else succeed and not feeling smaller because of it. Not because you're pretending not to care, but because your soul has stopped seeking validation in stolen reflections. You begin to understand something profound, that every life is on its own schedule, that no path is truly ahead or behind, that what you envy may one day become your regret if you acquired it at the cost of your inner world. Think of the public figure who seems to have everything, the admiration, the wealth, the status, and then you hear they are consumed by addiction or loneliness or shame. What is there to envy then? What did all that applause really buy them? The Stoics saw this not as cynicism, but as clarity. A reminder that the life worth pursuing is not the one that looks good, but the one that is good, deep down where the applause cannot reach. This doesn't mean you must live in obscurity or reject ambition. It means your ambition must be clean. It must be yours. It must not come from a bruised ego craving attention, but from a steady soul devoted to virtue. The Stoics admired excellence, but only when it was tethered to wisdom. Detached from wisdom, excellence becomes a trap, a shell polished for others to admire, hollow inside. So if you feel envy rising, let it rise. Do not flee. Do not distract. Sit with it. Study it like a philosopher examines the stars, not to possess it, but to understand its nature. And if it is, act on it, not with desperation, not with bitterness, but with a calm resolve. A man who moves in truth has no need to prove himself. A man who follows virtue has no rival. And in that space, between the impulse to envy and the decision to reflect, you will find something rare, sovereignty, the kind that cannot be taken, only chosen. The kind that makes you immune not just to the chaos of the world, but to the illusions it feeds you. That is the Stoic cure, and it begins every time you choose clarity over comparison. There is something humiliating about envy, not because it reveals weakness, but because it exposes attachment. And attachment, to the Stoic, is the root of all suffering. When you feel jealous, what you're really saying is, I need that to feel whole. I cannot bear the fact that someone else has what I crave. This admission is painful because it strikes at the illusion of self-sufficiency. But it is also liberating if you're willing to confront it with honesty, because the Stoic believes that nothing we crave in others is truly about the thing itself. It is about what we believe that thing represents within us. You do not envy money. You envy the freedom you think money will bring. You do not envy beauty. You envy the validation you imagine it secures. You do not envy someone's fame. You envy the illusion of being loved without question. But all of these are symbols, not realities. They are projections of a restless mind trying to soothe itself through external fixes. And the Stoic, if he is wise, sees that reaching for the symbols never addresses the real wound. So he does something far more radical. He stops the chase entirely. He sits still. He listens. He asks, what am I truly lacking? And more often than not, the answer has nothing to do with the other person at all. It has to do with a neglected duty, an abandoned value, an internal standard that has been quietly lowered over time. Envy becomes a signal that you have drifted from your own compass. And once you see that, you no longer have to fight envy. You can thank it. Because it revealed what you refused to admit, that you've been asleep at the wheel of your own life. This too is Stoicism, not the suppression of emotion, but the transformation of it. To feel jealousy and use it as a mirror, not a weapon. To examine the roots, not just trim the branches. Because the Stoic is not a moralist obsessed with perfection, he is a realist obsessed with truth. And the truth is, emotions are teachers, even the ugly ones, especially the ugly ones. Now, some exciting news. Our channel now offers a members club. By joining it, you'll unlock exclusive benefits, deeper content dives, and personal insights. Join us on this journey, and let's build a meaningful life together. And I also humbly ask you to leave a comment, as it helps my channel immensely. If you do not know what to comment, just write, "Better every day," so I know you reached this far. And don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Also, I've linked some books on Stoicism that helped me become the man I am today, and will also help you achieve a Stoic mindset. Take the example of Musonius Rufus, the Roman Stoic, who taught that virtue is not an ornament to be admired, but a discipline to be trained. He once wrote that what we envy in others should never be admired without first understanding how it was gained. Was it earned through toil or through compromise? Was it the result of virtue or the cost of virtue? The Stoic does not envy results without first weighing the method. Because how you acquire something matters more than what you acquire. And here lies another secret. Much of what you envy you could attain, but you would not want the price. You envy the artist's fame, but not the solitude it required. You envy the entrepreneur's wealth, but not the sleepless years. You envy the athlete's body, but not the discipline. The Stoic asks, if I envy the result, am I also willing to embrace the process? If not, then the envy is not real, it is fantasy. Fantasy is the enemy of peace. It builds castles in your mind and calls them goals. It seduces you with shortcuts, illusions, and images. But Stoicism is the philosophy of the real. It is the discipline of the present. It does not entertain longing without cost, nor comparison without correction. So when the image of another's life tempts you, do not stare. Turn inward. Ask yourself, what in me is unsatisfied? What am I pretending I don't already have the power to create? Because no life worth envying is free from sacrifice. And the Stoic knows that envy often withers when you reveal what lies behind the curtain. This is not a philosophy of scorn. Stoicism is not bitter toward the successful. On the contrary, it honors excellence. It admires those who pursue the good, the noble, the just. But it does not confuse visibility with virtue. It does not confuse noise with meaning. And it certainly does not waste time longing for another's journey, because that journey was never yours to begin with. You were given one life, one fate, one path to walk, shaped by your nature, your decisions, your tests. And every time you look away from it to long for someone else's, you weaken your grip on your own destiny. So take your gaze back. Return your focus to the place it belongs, the conduct of your soul. The Stoics remind us that peace is not found by getting more, but by needing less. And when envy knocks, that is your moment to prove it, not through self-denial, but through clarity. To say, I see what they have, but I know what I am building, and I will not abandon it to chase shadows. That is where strength is forged, not in what you have, but in what you refuse to be shaken by. The Stoics believed that the greatest wealth is not to need much, and in the context of envy, this belief becomes a shield. Because the less you need from others, the less vulnerable you are to their success. And the less you require from the world to feel worthy, the more unshakable your peace becomes. Jealousy, then, is the clearest sign of spiritual poverty. Not because it's immoral, but because it reveals that your sense of sufficiency has been handed over to things beyond your control. And what the world celebrates is often the very thing that enslaves the individual who possesses it. Fame turns a person into a prisoner of deception. Riches become a burden of maintenance. Beauty fades and demands constant preservation. Even love, if rooted in insecurity, becomes a battlefield of control. And yet we envy, not knowing what we envy. We envy what the world tells us is good, without examining what it costs. The Stoic is trained to look beneath the image, beneath the performance, beneath the reward. Because virtue, the only true good, has no need to advertise itself. It exists quietly, steadily, in the inner world of the disciplined man. It shines not through acclaim, but through consistency. And no amount of envy can reach it, because it is not built on comparison. It is built on harmony, the alignment between what you value, what you believe, and how you act. Ask yourself then, when was the last time you felt envy that did not come from a wound already present? Jealousy does not appear randomly. It attaches itself to a fracture, a place in your life where you have drifted from your values or abandoned your pace or doubted your worth. That's where it enters. And if you trace it carefully, if you follow the thread all the way to its source, you'll often find a forgotten standard, a neglected principle, or a voice that was silenced by fear. The Stoic cure is not to shout over that voice, but to listen to it, to give it space. To ask, what did I leave behind that made me so vulnerable to this feeling? Because jealousy is not always about wanting what others have. Sometimes it's grief for the parts of yourself you betrayed, and in this sense it becomes not a flaw, but a compass. Let's say you envy a peer who is flourishing in a career you once dreamed of, but abandoned out of fear or fatigue. The envy is not about them, it's about your unlived life. It's about the path not taken, the dream buried under pragmatism or self-doubt. And the Stoic response is not self-punishment, it's course correction. It's the courage to ask, can I still return? Can I still live in alignment even now? Often the answer is yes. Not in the same way, not with the same conditions, but in a way that is still true, because the Stoic does not live in fantasy. He lives in the present, and from the present, everything real can still be built, but only if he stops watching others. There is a kind of mental silence that is born from dropping the constant habit of comparison. And in that silence, something new begins to grow, original desire. Not reactive desire, not the desire to match or impress, but pure, examined personal longing. The kind that emerges when all other voices have been quieted and only your own remains. The Stoics treasured this. They called it euthymia, a tranquil confidence in your own path. Seneca wrote about it as the ability to be content with yourself, to not veer or drift, but to march straight ahead. But this requires that you first turn away from the spectacle of others, not out of pride, but out of necessity, because your attention is your power, and envy is a parasite that feeds on attention misdirected. So guard it. When someone else rises, ask not why them, but what does this awaken in me? Is it pain? Is it inspiration? Is it a revelation that I have more work to do, not on the world, but on myself? That is the Stoic's approach. He does not curse the world for being unfair. He does not weep that he was overlooked. He simply turns inward and begins again. And in doing so, he reclaims the one thing envy always threatens to take: agency. Because the final lie of jealousy is helplessness. It tells you that you cannot be at peace until something changes, in them, in you, in fate itself. But the Stoic knows better. He knows that peace is not a reaction to circumstance. It is a practice of attention. It is a discipline of judgment. It is the result of aligning your values so precisely that nothing outside of you can create inner discord. That is the goal. Not to destroy envy, but to transcend it. There's a certain nobility in choosing not to envy, especially in a world that monetizes comparison. Everywhere you look, someone is displaying their highlight reel, not merely living, but performing their life for an invisible audience. We scroll through filtered images, curated lifestyles, and polished moments, and somewhere, without realizing, we begin to feel that our quiet life, our unnoticed progress, is inadequate, that unless our virtue is seen, it is incomplete. But the Stoics would call this madness. They would call it slavery to spectacle. Because once your self-respect depends on being recognized, you no longer own it. And yet, how tempting it is to chase that recognition, to make our lives legible to others, to wear our value like a badge. But the Stoic turns from that seduction. He does not decorate his soul with public approval. He anchors it in private clarity. For him, dignity is not a currency. It is a commitment, a way of walking even when no one watches. Jealousy thrives in the absence of that commitment. It breeds in the shadows where your principles have not yet taken root. And that is why envy hurts, not because someone else has more, but because their success confronts your lack of clarity. It reminds you that you have not yet chosen your path with conviction, and until you do, every other life will feel like a threat. But once you do, once you plant your feet firmly in the soil of your own values, you become immune to distraction. You begin to see others not as competitors, but as evidence that it is possible to live fully if only you stay true. And when envy arises, it passes quickly. It becomes nothing more than a gust of wind against a stable structure. This is the great irony: the less you need from others, the more room you create to genuinely appreciate them. The Stoic does not hate the successful. He admires them if their success reflects virtue. He does not resent the gifted. He celebrates them if their gift is used with purpose. But he does not wish to be them because he is too busy becoming himself. This principle shows up in every corner of life. The parent who envies another's seemingly perfect family, not knowing what private pain that family hides. The artist who resents another's fame, forgetting that attention and meaning are not the same. the lover who compares themselves to past partners, failing to realize that love is not a hierarchy to win, but a connection to nurture. The Stoic would tell all of them, return to your lane, examine your standards, redefine what success means to you. Because most envy is the result of unconscious goals, ideas implanted by culture, habit, or wounded pride. And the moment you bring those goals into conscious light, you begin to see how little they serve you. So ask yourself carefully, do I truly want what I envy? Or do I simply want to stop feeling like I'm not enough? Because the former can lead to a meaningful pursuit, but the latter will lead only to exhaustion. Seneca, who lived among wealth and corruption, knew this well. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, who is poor, he wrote. The poverty of envy is a poverty of direction. It signals that you've borrowed your vision from someone else's life. But the Stoic path demands authorship. You must write your own definition of wealth, of success, of beauty, of joy, and then live it, regardless of who notices. That takes courage, because envy is easy. Envy asks nothing of you but to watch and ache. But the Stoic practice asks everything. It demands that you stand in the arena of your life and take responsibility, not just for your actions, but for your desires. And this is perhaps the most revolutionary idea of all. You are responsible for what you want. If you envy the wrong things, it is because you have not yet interrogated your wants. You have not yet refined your taste. But that is not shameful. It is the work of philosophy, the work of maturity, the work of becoming someone whose peace is unshaken, not because life is perfect, but because your soul is governed by truth, not trend. And once that is in place, once you know what matters to you and why, the noise of others fades. Their fortune, their fame, their favor, they become neutral, neither threats nor aspirations, just facts. And you remain steady, rooted, and inwardly rich, because you have something rarer than success. You have self-possession. Imagine walking through a crowded market of lives, each stall offering something different. Wealth, charisma, acclaim, beauty, talent, pleasure. And all of them calling out to you, tempting you to compare, to doubt, to stray. The world is a loud place, and envy is its salesman. It calls out not with truth, but with illusion. It says, look what they have. Look how far behind you are. Look how small your life is. But the Stoic doesn't shop in this market. He walks past quietly, with eyes set on what cannot be bought, integrity. Because when you strip away the drama of jealousy, what remains is simply this, a moment of forgetting who you are. That's what envy is, a lapse. A moment where you let your gaze drift too long into someone else's story and began to wish you were living it. But that's not living. That's imitation. That's borrowed desire. And the Stoic does not borrow desire. He refines it. He filters it through reason and says, is this mine, or is this the world speaking through me? It's a radical act, this filtering. Because once you begin, you realize how much of your longing is inherited, from culture, from advertising, from parents, from peers. Most people spend their lives chasing shadows cast by other people's values. But the Stoic stops and says, no more. I will want only what is truly good, only what strengthens me, only what liberates me. And when that decision is made, when you consciously choose your values, envy dries up like a stream cut off from its source. There is, of course, pain in this process. You must grieve the stories you once believed. You must watch others gain things you have chosen to no longer pursue. You must face the silence of non-conformity. But on the other side of that silence is a deeper sound, the voice of your own reason. And that voice, once heard clearly, becomes your compass through the madness of the world. Marcus Aurelius, who lived surrounded by flattery, distraction, and betrayal, reminded himself daily, don't waste the rest of your life worrying about other people unless it affects the common good. He knew the pull of envy. He knew the temptation to compare. But he also knew it was a waste of the one thing we never get back, time. And what greater tragedy than to spend your limited years wishing you had someone else's path when your own was waiting to be walked? Envy is not just a personal flaw. It is a theft. It steals your time, your attention, your energy. It pulls you out of your lane and into a race that isn't yours. And when you lose, and you will, because comparison never ends, you feel not just defeated, but detached from yourself. This is the hidden danger. Jealousy doesn't just make you want what others have, it makes you forget what you already had. That's why the Stoic practice is a practice of remembering your priorities, remembering your principles, remembering that virtue is not a competition, it is a condition of your own soul, and no one else's life can give or take it from you. When you look at someone else and feel the stirrings of envy, the Stoic response is simple but profound. Return. Return to your breath. Return to your reason. Return to your chosen path. Because the moment you leave it, even for admiration, even for curiosity, you've made yourself a stranger to your own values. But return often enough, and something begins to change. You become less reactive, less moved by the noise, less interested in appearances, and more drawn to substance, to honesty, to depth, the kind of life that isn't always impressive, but is always real. And what does it mean to live a real life? It means choosing what matters over what glitters. It means walking slowly past applause when it does not match your values. It means standing still when others rush forward, and smiling quietly when they wonder why you are not running too. It means redefining success as being the same person in public and in private. And yes, it means sometimes being misunderstood, but the Stoic does not fear that, because he would rather be misunderstood for living in truth than praised for living a lie. This is the final gift of letting go of envy, freedom. Freedom to be who you are without needing someone else to be smaller. Freedom to celebrate others without shrinking. Freedom to fail without shame. And freedom to rise without arrogance. The Stoic does not deny the pang of envy. He transforms it into inquiry, into clarity, into fuel, and most of all, into the unwavering decision to be ruled only by truth, not by the shadow of someone else's fortune. Not because they never feel it, but because they've learned to see through it, to pierce its illusion before it takes root. They know what the Stoics knew, that envy cannot survive in a well-tended soul, that it feeds on confusion, on unconscious imitation, on a misplaced sense of lack. And once you reclaim those parts of yourself, once you remember who you are and why you chose the path you're on, envy has nowhere left to live. But this transformation does not come quickly. It requires attention, repetition, reflection. It requires that you catch yourself in the act, the sideways glance, the lingering thought, the invisible comparison, and gently redirect. Not with shame, not with denial, but with curiosity. Why am I unsettled? What value have I temporarily abandoned? What does this reaction teach me about the kind of person I still wish to become? The Stoic life is not an escape from emotion, it is a disciplined conversation with it. And jealousy, like all emotions, has its message. It tells you what you secretly desire. It reveals the cracks in your self-respect. And it invites you, if you are willing, to build your house stronger, deeper, more aligned. You begin by simplifying. A Stoic simplifies because he sees that most complexity in life is artificial, layers of performance, of insecurity, of borrowed goals. And envy is one of the most complicated illusions of all. It weaves itself through desire, identity, pride, shame, ambition, and longing. But at its core, it is fragile, because it depends entirely on what lies outside you. And the Stoic, trained to stand only on what he can control, lets it crumble. And in its place, something unshakable emerges: gratitude. Not the shallow kind, forced in the face of pain, but the kind that rises from alignment. Gratitude for the path you've chosen, for the person you're becoming, for the peace that comes from knowing that your values are not for sale, The Stoic doesn't pretend everything is perfect. He simply refuses to measure his life by anyone else's standards. And so he becomes immune, not because he is indifferent, but because he is anchored. You cannot tempt him with another's fortune because he sees the invisible costs. You cannot shame him with comparison because he knows comparison is a game designed to distract. And you cannot unsettle his peace with someone else's success because he knows peace is not a product of winning. It is the fruit of knowing exactly what matters and refusing to betray it. Jealousy is loud. Virtue is quiet. One demands attention. The other builds character. One clings to illusion. The other walks with truth. And that's the life the Stoic chooses, not the life that looks best, but the life that is best, by the only standard that matters. Who am I becoming in the face of this feeling? So next time envy visits, let it speak. Let it show you the unfinished work. Let it name the part of your soul that still seeks applause, still fears being unseen, still wants to be enough in the eyes of strangers. And then let it go. With understanding, with gratitude, with discipline. Because the person you're becoming does not need envy anymore. He has something far greater. He has clarity. He has calm. He has freedom. And most of all, he has himself. Now, if any part of this message has been helpful to you, leave us your like and comment, helping the algorithm recommend it to someone who needs it at this time. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new videos. And if you look through the videos we've already uploaded, you're sure to find something to take with you. Have a good day. There is a kind of slavery that wears no chains, a burden so invisible that most people carry it their entire lives without questioning it. It is not the slavery of a master standing over you, nor the kind that confines your body. It is the slavery of constantly trying to prove yourself, of living every day as if you are on trial, and the jury is made up of strangers, acquaintances, and even those you call friends. You may not feel the weight at first. In fact, it often disguises itself as ambition, as self-improvement, as wanting to be the best version of yourself. But if you look closely, you'll see the truth. You are not chasing excellence for its own sake. You are chasing the approval of others, the kind of approval that disappears as quickly as it arrives. You know this feeling, even if you don't speak of it. The way your heart tightens when someone questions your abilities. The way your mind burns with the need to defend yourself when accused of something unjust. The silent pressure to make sure others see you as competent, worthy, successful, never weak, never wrong. You check your words twice before speaking, not because you seek clarity, but because you fear being misunderstood. You say yes to things you don't want, not out of kindness, but because you can't bear the thought of being seen as unhelpful or unworthy. And somewhere along the way, you forget what you actually wanted in the first place. The Stoics understood this trap. Epictetus warned that if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. To the untrained mind, this sounds like a kind of defeatism. Why should I be content with others thinking less of me? But to the Stoic, it is a declaration of independence. The moment you are no longer enslaved to the perceptions of others, you step into a realm of freedom that few will ever experience. You stop living life as a constant defense case and start living it as an unfolding truth, one that doesn't need permission or validation. But let's be honest, letting go of the need to prove yourself is not as simple as flipping a switch. It is the unraveling of a habit so deeply embedded in you that it feels like part of your identity. From childhood, we are trained to measure our worth against the reactions of others. The gold stars, the applause, the grades, the likes, the promotions, all of them condition us to believe that our value exists in the eyes of someone else. By the time we reach adulthood, we are fluent in the silent art of self-advertisement, constantly shaping our words, our appearance, and our achievements to fit into whatever mold seems most likely to win approval. And yet, beneath all of this posturing, there is a quiet truth waiting to be discovered that you can stop. That you can simply step away from the stage. That you can live without the constant hum of performance in your mind. This is the beginning of Stoic freedom, not freedom from responsibility, but freedom from the exhausting compulsion to make sure everyone knows you are doing well. Imagine walking into a room and not caring whether you impress anyone there. Imagine failing publicly and not feeling the need to explain yourself. Imagine being insulted and responding with silence, not because you are crushed, but because the insult has no power over you. When you stop trying to prove yourself, something remarkable happens. The world's grip on you loosens. You no longer run from disapproval like it's a fire at your back, nor do you chase praise as if it were the last drop of water in the desert. You begin to act from principle rather than from performance. Your words become clearer, your choices bolder, your movements slower and more deliberate. You find that you do not need to advertise your worth. It is simply expressed through the way you live, the consistency of your actions, the steadiness of your mind. Of course, the world will resist this transformation. People will call you arrogant for not defending yourself. They will call you cold for not engaging in the games of social performance. They will misinterpret your calm for weakness, your silence for guilt, your independence for detachment. This is the price you pay for leaving the stage. And yet, once you see the trap for what it is, the price feels laughably small compared to the peace you gain. So, here is the first truth to carry with you. You do not exist to convince others of your worth. Your worth is not a court case to be argued, nor a trophy to be displayed. It is not up for vote, nor does it need constant renewal through applause. To live by this truth is to step out of the prison cell you never realized you were in. The key has always been in your hand. It was only your fear of what others might think that kept you from using it. If you look closely at the constant urge to prove yourself, you will find that it is never truly about the thing you are defending. It is not about your job title, your relationship status, your bank account, or your abilities. Those are just the props on the stage. Beneath them lies the real reason, the quiet, unspoken fear that if you are not approved of, you will be left alone. That if you are not admired, you will be overlooked. That if you are not constantly proving your worth, you will eventually be discarded. This is the unacknowledged script that has been running in the background of your life. And it is here that Stoicism cuts deeper than mere self-help slogans. A modern motivational speaker might tell you to believe in yourself or ignore the haters. The Stoic goes further. He demands that you confront the root of your fear and see it for what it is, an attachment to something you cannot control, the opinion of others. Epictetus was relentless on this point. If you want to be invincible, stop concerning yourself with what is not in your control. And what could be more out of your control than the shifting moods and judgments of other people? You could spend your entire life curating the perfect image, speaking the perfect words, and moving through the world with flawless precision, and still someone will misunderstand you, dislike you, or dismiss you. The tragedy is that this fear is rarely challenged directly. Instead, we build elaborate routines to avoid it. We over-explain our decisions so no one questions them. We volunteer for things we don't care about just to appear committed. We hide our struggles because we fear they will be taken as evidence of incompetence. We even change the way we laugh, the way we dress, the way we speak, depending on who is watching. In the process, we become actors in our own lives, performing for an audience whose loyalty we cannot buy and whose applause fades faster than it comes. But here is the paradox that Stoicism reveals. The very thing you fear, the loss of approval, is exactly what frees you. When you stop depending on it, you discover that you do not collapse without it. You do not vanish into irrelevance. You do not lose your capacity to live well. Instead, you gain something infinitely more valuable: self-governance. You begin to make decisions not to preserve an image, but to preserve your integrity. You learn to act not from fear of exclusion, but from clarity about what is right. Consider the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. Surrounded by power, intrigue, and flattery, he could have spent his reign in a constant performance, tailoring every decision to win the favor of the Senate or the army. And yet, in his private writings, he tells himself again and again to act according to nature, to the good, to reason, not to popularity. He reminds himself that those who praise him today will be dust tomorrow, and that to live for their approval is to live in chains. This is not the detachment of someone who doesn't care about people. It is the wisdom of someone who refuses to be ruled by them. The shift begins when you stop asking, "What will they think if I do this?" and start asking, "Is this the right thing to do?" The first question binds you to an endless cycle of speculation and performance. The second anchors you in something that cannot be taken away, your own moral compass. It is a compass that does not bend to the weather of opinion, does not shatter when someone mocks you, does not crumble when you are misunderstood. And the more you use it, the stronger it becomes. This is why the Stoics saw courage not just as a battlefield virtue, but as an everyday necessity. It takes courage to tell the truth when a lie would make you look better. It takes courage to admit ignorance instead of pretending to know. It takes courage to let others misinterpret your silence rather than jumping in to defend your reputation. And every time you choose courage over performance, you loosen the grip of that hidden fear. So the next time you feel the pull to prove yourself, pause. Ask yourself what you are actually afraid of. Is it really that someone might think less of you? Or is it that you might have to face a world where their opinion no longer controls you? That is the world the Stoic lives in, a world where worth is self-sustaining, where dignity does not require an audience, and where the fear beneath the performance is not just silenced, but dissolved. There is a moment, though it rarely announces itself with fanfare, when you realize you have been playing a game you never agreed to join. It is not a dramatic explosion nor a bold proclamation for the world to hear. Often it happens quietly. You are sitting in a meeting, perhaps, listening to someone question your ability in a way that is unfair, perhaps even insulting. You feel the old reflex ignite, the familiar tightening in your chest, the rehearsed urge to jump in, to explain, to correct, to prove. But instead of acting on it, something inside you stays still. You breathe. You let the wave pass. You say nothing or you say very little, and in that stillness you realize something extraordinary. The world does not end when you stop defending yourself. This is the rupture, the moment the performance breaks and you glimpse the life that exists beyond it. It is a fragile moment at first. Your mind will scramble to pull you back into the old rhythm. If I don't respond, they'll think I'm weak. If I don't clarify, they'll believe I'm wrong. And yet, if you hold your ground, if you refuse to leap into the performance, you begin to taste a freedom that words can only approximate. You begin to see that every desperate attempt to prove yourself was, in truth, an unspoken admission that the other person's judgment mattered more than your own. The Stoics did not wait for these moments by accident, they trained for them. They understood that the urge to prove oneself is nothing more than an attachment to reputation, and reputation is one of the most unstable possessions a human being can cling to. Seneca reminded himself that what is said about you does not change who you are. The self remains intact, whether it is clothed in praise or clothed in insult. But to live as if this is true requires practice. It requires that you allow small losses of image in order to gain large victories of self-mastery. You may think this kind of restraint looks passive, but it is not passivity, it is strategy. The Stoic is not withdrawing because they have no answer, but because they have chosen not to waste their life defending a self-image to people who cannot give or take away their worth. In that silence there is not weakness, but sovereignty. It is the same sovereignty Marcus Aurelius spoke of when he reminded himself that other people's opinions are like shadows. They move with the light, and the light changes constantly. To chase the shape of the shadow is to abandon the solidity of your own form. Breaking the cycle begins with small acts of defiance against the compulsion to explain yourself. Someone misreads your intention, and instead of launching into a detailed defense, you let the misunderstanding stand. Someone dismisses your idea without truly hearing it, and instead of repeating yourself louder, you move on. Someone believes you failed, and instead of proving that you succeeded in ways they can't see, you accept their perception as theirs to keep. Each time you do this, you feel the subtle panic of not being in control of how you are perceived. and each time the panic fades a little faster. This is not an easy adjustment. At first it will feel unnatural, even reckless, to let go of the reins. The silence will feel like surrender, the stillness like exposure. Your mind will keep replaying the situation, writing and rewriting the perfect defense you could have given. But eventually a shift happens. You begin to notice the energy you have conserved by not chasing every misunderstanding. You notice the mental clarity that comes from not arguing every point. And perhaps most surprisingly, you notice that the respect you thought you would lose by staying silent does not vanish. Sometimes it even grows. There is an authority that comes from not being provoked into self-justification. It signals that you are not easily shaken, that your sense of worth is rooted in something deeper than applause. People may not say it aloud, but they feel it. They recognize that you are not competing for approval in the same marketplace where everyone else is desperately trading their dignity for scraps of validation. And while some may resent it, others will quietly admire it, even if they never tell you so. But the greatest benefit is the one that no audience can witness, the internal lightness. The moment you stop playing the game of proving yourself, you feel as though someone has untied a weight from around your chest. You can move more freely, not because the world has changed, but because the invisible strings pulling you in every direction have been cut. Your mind no longer circles endlessly around the question of whether you are being seen in the right way. Instead, it begins to focus on whether you are living in the right way. This is the transition point from a life of reaction to a life of intention. You start to realize that the time you once spent crafting arguments to defend your reputation can now be spent building the kind of character that doesn't require defense. The strength you once wasted on chasing other people's acknowledgement can now be invested in pursuits that matter to you, whether or not they are understood or admired by anyone else. You begin to live as the Stoics advised, rooted in what is within your control, untouched by what is not. To stop proving yourself is not to stop caring about the quality of your actions, it is to stop measuring their worth by the applause they earn. The Stoic still strives for virtue, still seeks wisdom, still acts with justice, but he does these things for their own sake, not because he hopes they will be noticed. He knows that some acts of integrity will be misunderstood, that some acts of courage will be mocked, that some acts of kindness will be met with suspicion. None of this matters. The act itself is the reward. The alignment between principle and action is all the validation needed. And so, when the rupture comes, when you stand in that moment and refuse to play, you are not merely breaking a habit. You are declaring, silently but powerfully, that your life is not an audition, and you are not a performer seeking a part in someone else's approval. You are living your own role, and it needs no audience to be complete. The first days after you stop playing the game of proving yourself feel almost surreal. You notice the difference, not because the world suddenly treats you better, but because your relationship with the world has changed. Conversations that once felt like silent battlegrounds now feel lighter. Situations that would have triggered a wave of defensive explanations now pass over you with less urgency. It's not that you've lost your passion or your drive, it's that you've stopped trying to package them for public consumption. At first, some people will be unsettled by this change. If they were accustomed to you justifying every decision, they will find your new stillness strange, maybe even irritating. Those who relied on your eagerness to defend yourself may interpret your silence as arrogance or withdrawal. But the truth is, you are neither. You are simply living with a new economy of energy. You no longer spend it on battles that cannot be won and were never worth fighting. This shift has a profound effect on relationships. Friendships once propped up by constant reassurance begin to transform. You find that you no longer need to be validated by your friends to feel secure in their presence. You can disagree without fear that the bond will shatter. You can let others be wrong about you without scrambling to correct them. The same is true in family life. Disapproval no longer hits you like a verdict. It feels more like a passing weather pattern, uncomfortable but temporary. You begin to notice that many conflicts within families are not truly about values or actions, but about image, about someone feeling that their version of the story must be accepted by all. Once you step outside that demand, much of the tension dissolves. Work takes on a different tone as well. The workplace, perhaps more than anywhere else, is a theater of proving endless meetings, performance reviews, carefully worded emails meant to protect reputations. But when you stop defining your worth by how others rank you, you work with a different kind of focus. You stop chasing tasks for visibility and start choosing them for their actual impact. You no longer burn energy ensuring that credit is properly attributed, you let the work speak for itself. And while this doesn't guarantee recognition, it builds something more valuable: quiet authority. You become the person others trust because you are not visibly scrambling for approval. Your inner dialogue also begins to shift in unexpected ways. Without the constant background noise of "what will they think?" your mind feels more spacious. Thoughts that were once consumed with rehearsing explanations now have room to wander into creative territory. You catch yourself noticing details you would have missed: the way light falls through a window, the sound of wind in a narrow street, the texture of the air before rain. This is not just sentimentality, it is a byproduct of having reclaimed the attention that used to be spent monitoring your image. This is not to say the need to prove yourself disappears entirely. Like any old habit, it will resurface in moments of vulnerability. Someone will make a cutting remark and you will feel the old reflex stir. But now you recognize it for what it is, not a command, but an invitation, one you can decline. You begin to notice the gap between stimulus and response, and in that gap lies your freedom. The Stoics placed great importance on this space. It is here, in the pause before action, that you decide whether to be ruled by impulse or guided by reason. Living without the constant need to prove yourself also reveals who in your life is drawn to you for the right reasons. When you are no longer offering yourself up for approval, you stop attracting those who thrive on dominance or control. The people who remain, and the ones who arrive, tend to value you for your presence, your steadiness, and your truth, not for the performance you once gave. Relationships built on this foundation may be fewer, but they are deeper, sturdier, and more nourishing. You also develop a more honest relationship with failure. When you are not concerned about how failure looks, you can examine it more clearly. You can admit mistakes without shame because your worth is no longer tied to flawless performance. You can take risks you once avoided because you are not paralyzed by the thought of how you will explain yourself if it doesn't work out. The Stoics saw failure not as a stain but as a teacher, and they understood that the real disgrace was in failing to act at all because of fear of judgment. Perhaps the most unexpected outcome is the sense of time you regain. The hours you once spent overthinking how you were perceived are now available for living. You can read without checking your phone for reactions. You can take a walk without mentally drafting your next defense. You can end a conversation without replaying it for hidden criticisms. This reclaimed time is not just empty space. It becomes fertile ground for growth, for deeper study, for quiet joy. And in this reclaimed life, you start to see why the Stoics spoke so often of living in accordance with nature. Not because it means a return to some rustic simplicity, but because it means living in alignment with what is essential. You are no longer bending yourself into shapes designed to fit the temporary approval of others. You are standing in your own form, shaped only by truth, discipline, and the ongoing refinement of your character. In the end, life after the break is not about becoming untouchable or indifferent. It is about becoming stable. It is about finding the place within yourself that does not tremble when misunderstood, that does not wither when criticized, that does not swell with pride when praised. This is what the Stoics meant by freedom, not the absence of challenge, but the absence of enslavement to what you cannot control. Once you have tasted it, you will find it difficult to return to the old way of living. The performance will feel heavy, unnatural, almost absurd. And while the world will keep playing its games of approval and disapproval, you will walk through it with the calm assurance of someone who no longer needs to win them. It is easy to believe you have conquered the need to prove yourself when life is calm. In the quiet spaces when no one is questioning you, when no one is watching, it is simple to imagine that your independence is unshakable. But then comes the real test. These are the moments that separate mere posturing from true freedom. Imagine the betrayal first. A friend you trusted speaks against you in a room you cannot enter, twisting your words, painting you in colors that are not yours. You hear about it secondhand, the story warped by distance, yet still sharp enough to wound. The old reflex surges to life. You want to confront, to demand an explanation, to gather allies who will confirm your innocence. Your mind begins constructing the defense before you have even caught your breath. But here is the moment of choice, the point where the Stoic training must hold. For what will it change if you defend yourself? Will those who believe the falsehood suddenly believe the truth? Or will you have only spent your strength trying to rewrite a script that was never yours to control? In such moments, the Stoic recalls that the truth of a person is not determined by the stories told about them. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." But he never added, "And if they say it about you, make sure they stop." The measure of your life is your own conduct, not the noise others make about it. By holding to your principles and letting the chatter burn itself out, you maintain the one thing that matters, the alignment between your actions and your values. Public humiliation is a different kind of trial. It is one thing to be misunderstood in private, it is another to be stripped bare in the eyes of many. A mistake at work that becomes the talk of the office. A moment of vulnerability caught on camera and spread across screens. The natural instinct is to repair the image as quickly as possible, to issue explanations, apologies, clarifications, anything to stop the bleeding. But the Stoic sees that much of the pain here is not in the event itself, but in the story we tell ourselves about what it means. If your worth does not depend on the crowd's applause, then their laughter cannot take it away. You may choose to correct a falsehood or apologize for an error, but not out of panic, and not because you are scrambling to restore a version of yourself that exists only in other people's minds. You do it because it is right, and nothing more. Loss brings its own test, though it may not seem connected at first. When we lose something or someone that others know about, the shadow of judgment creeps in. They may pity you, or worse, treat you as diminished. If you are deeply attached to proving yourself, you will want to show them you are still strong, still capable, still okay. But the Stoic knows that strength is not loud. That interest enter, it does not need to be demonstrated to be real. It shows itself in the quiet endurance of grief, in the way you keep to your duties without self-pity, in the way you neither collapse into despair nor perform resilience for an audience. The absence of a performance does not mean you feel less. It means you refuse to turn your suffering into a spectacle for the sake of reassurance. And yet, it would be dishonest to claim that the pull to defend yourself vanishes completely, even for the seasoned Stoic. These trials stir up the same old reflexes because they touch something primal: our fear of being cast out from the tribe, our fear of being reduced to a false image, our fear of being unseen for who we are. The difference now is that you see the reflex for what it is, a survival mechanism suited to a life you no longer live. In the ancient world, to be misunderstood or cast out could mean death. In the modern world, it usually means discomfort. And discomfort, as the Stoics tirelessly reminded themselves, is nothing to fear. When you face these storms without scrambling for proof, something profound happens. You realize that the people whose opinion truly matters already know the truth or are willing to find it without being sold on it. Those who leap to judge without understanding were never allies to begin with. By not rushing to persuade them, you let them reveal themselves. In this way, even betrayal, humiliation, and loss become clarifying forces. They strip away the unsteady alliances built on appearance and leave only what is real. It is important to note that the Stoic path is not one of passivity or indifference. To refuse to prove yourself is not to let lies stand unchallenged in every circumstance. There are times when justice demands that the truth be spoken, not for the sake of your image, but for the sake of preventing harm, correcting injustice, or defending those who cannot defend themselves. The difference is that when a Stoic speaks in such moments, it is not from the frantic need to protect their own standing, but from a deliberate choice aligned with reason and virtue. This is why the trials by fire are so valuable. They reveal whether your freedom is real or merely theoretical. In comfort, anyone can say they don't care what others think. In the heat of accusation, mockery, or loss, only those who have truly loosened the chains can remain steady. And when you come through such moments without having traded your dignity for the temporary relief of public approval, you carry something far more enduring than a restored reputation. You carry self-respect. The Stoics' aim is not to emerge from the fire untouched, but to emerge unbroken. There will be scars, marks left by words, betrayals, or losses. But these are not signs of weakness. They are proof that you chose the harder road, the one that leads away from the exhausting theater of constant justification and toward the quiet strength of self-possession. And in that strength lies a peace the world cannot give and therefore cannot take away. When you are no longer living to prove yourself, the nature of your actions changes in ways that are difficult to see from the outside but deeply felt from within. You begin to notice that your movements through the world are less hurried, less theatrical, less dependent on the imagined gaze of others. Decisions that once carried the weight of "what will they think?" now feel lighter because the answer to that question no longer dictates the course you take. This shift might sound subtle, but it changes the very foundation of how you live. Consider leadership. Most people who lead, whether in formal positions or simply in moments of influence, do so with an unspoken tether to approval. They take polls, they scan the room, they craft their messages to align with the prevailing mood. This is not inherently wrong. Prudence has its place, but it often dilutes the strength of the decision itself. When you lead without the need for validation, your focus narrows to what is right, what is effective, what is true. You no longer fear the quiet periods when your choices are unpopular, because you are not building your leadership on the fragile scaffolding of universal agreement. This does not mean you become reckless or dismissive of feedback. The Stoic does not ignore wisdom wherever it is found. But there is a difference between listening to advice and being ruled by it. When you are free from the compulsion to prove yourself, you can hear criticism without defensiveness and praise without intoxication. Both become information rather than verdicts, data points rather than identities. And in this way, your decisions begin to carry a different weight, not the weight of someone who must be seen as right, but of someone who is committed to doing what is right. The same transformation happens in creative work. Many people create, whether art, writing, business ventures, or even personal projects, primarily for the sake of recognition. Their motivation rises and falls with the approval they receive. But when you no longer need to prove yourself, creation becomes an act of alignment rather than an act of seduction. You make the thing because it is worth making, not because you think it will draw applause. You measure its success not by the number of eyes that see it, but by whether it stands in harmony with your principles and your purpose. This is why so much ancient Stoic writing, including the meditations of Marcus Aurelius, was never intended for public view. It was done for the sake of the work itself, for the strengthening of the soul, not for an audience. Love itself changes, perhaps more than anything else. When you are living to prove yourself, even love can become a form of performance, subtly shaped to win affection, to avoid rejection, to project an image of worthiness. But when you love without needing to prove your value, the love becomes freer, cleaner, more generous. You no longer give affection as a bargain for validation. You give it because it is in your nature to give. And because your worth is not at stake, you can survive the absence of reciprocation. You can love without clinging, without bending yourself into unnatural shapes to keep someone's approval. This freedom also changes how you approach risk. Without the crutch of applause to keep you upright, you learn to balance on the strength of your own conviction. You are more willing to take paths that may be misunderstood or criticized because you are no longer terrified of the optics. This does not mean you become blind to consequences, rather, you weigh them differently. You ask, is this worth doing? Not, will this make me look good? And in this subtle shift, entire avenues of possibility open up, avenues that fear once kept closed. What's remarkable is how this way of living subtly reshapes your presence in the eyes of others. Without realizing it, you become the kind of person whose approval others begin to seek, not because you withhold it, but because your steadiness is rare. People sense that you are not bending your principles to earn anyone's favor, and in a world where nearly everyone is performing in some way, this stands out. Yet, ironically, because you are no longer trying to prove yourself, you are unaffected by this admiration when it comes. You neither chase it nor guard it. If it fades, it fades. And this leads to perhaps the most liberating realization of all. You can initiate action without waiting for the right audience or the perfect moment. You do not need the safety net of guaranteed support before moving forward. You trust your reasoning process, your principles, and your willingness to adjust if you are wrong. This is what the Stoics meant when they spoke of living in accordance with nature. It is to act from the inner order of reason and virtue rather than the outer turbulence of opinion. Of course, living this way will not shield you from being misunderstood, criticized, or even ridiculed. In fact, it may attract these things because stepping outside the game of proving yourself makes others uncomfortable. Your refusal to participate is, in its own quiet way, a challenge to their unspoken belief that approval is everything. Some will try to pull you back in with provocation, with guilt, with subtle attempts to frame you as aloof or uncooperative. But these moments are simply echoes of the old life calling you back, and you no longer have to answer. The reward for resisting is not applause, not even respect, but something better, a deep, unshakable alignment between your actions and your values. This alignment becomes a compass that does not waver, even in the fog of uncertainty. You begin to notice that your days feel cleaner, less cluttered by the constant negotiation of image and perception. You sleep better, not because everyone approves of you, but because you approve of the life you are living. And perhaps most importantly, this way of living makes you resilient in the face of change. When your sense of self is not tethered to how others see you, shifts in fortune, whether sudden success or sudden loss, do not throw you into crisis. You can enjoy praise without being owned by it, and you can endure criticism without being crushed by it. You stand where you stand, and the wind can blow in any direction without knocking you from your place. This is the essence of Stoic freedom, the power to act without the crutch of applause, to create without the leash of recognition, to love without the bargain of validation. When you step away from the constant compulsion to prove yourself, the immediate effects are noticeable. Calmer days, lighter interactions, a quieter mind. But the true measure of this choice is not in the days or weeks after the break, it is in the years and decades that follow. The path of Stoic freedom is not a temporary adjustment, but a way of living that matures with you, altering not only the texture of your daily life, but also the story your years will tell when they are done. In the short term, the benefit is energy conserved. You are no longer exhausting yourself in the endless maintenance of an image. That energy, redirected, begins to accumulate, not in a way that can be measured in bank accounts or applause, but in something harder to define, a solidity of character. This is not the kind of strength that appears suddenly in a crisis. It is the kind that grows slowly, quietly, through years of acting from principle rather than from performance. And as the decades pass, this steady accumulation becomes your most valuable possession. The middle years of life are often where this difference is most evident. While others in your age group may find themselves chasing the next credential, the next visible proof of success, the next public affirmation, you are free to focus on depth over display. This doesn't mean you lack ambition, only that your ambition is for things that cannot be taken away: mastery of your craft, the integrity of your word, the strength of your relationships. You measure progress not by how many people notice, but by how much better you have become at living in accordance with your values. This independence from external validation also shapes the way you handle transitions. Career changes, relocations, the shifts in social circles that life inevitably brings, all are approached without the panic of someone who fears becoming invisible. When you are not defined by your audience, losing one stage simply means you step onto another. You do not need to drag the old crowd with you, nor do you need to announce your arrival to the new. You arrive, you act, you live, and that is enough. By the time you reach the later decades of life, the dividends of this freedom become even more apparent. Many people, as they age, feel the weight of regret for the years spent chasing approval they never truly needed. They realize too late that the applause they sought was fleeting, and that the compromises they made to earn it left them with a life that was more display than substance. But if you have lived without that hunger, your old age is not shadowed by this bitterness. Instead, it is marked by a kind of quiet contentment, a sense that you have lived your years without bending your spine to every passing judgment. The Stoics often wrote with the end of life in mind, not as a morbid fixation, but as a constant reminder that time is short and should not be wasted on what does not matter. Marcus Aurelius, knowing the weight of an emperor's reputation, still told himself, "The approval of 10,000 is nothing to me if it is without reason." Seneca warned against the folly of living as if we are to please an endless audience, when the only approval that truly matters is that of our own conscience. To carry these truths into old age is to be spared the desperate scrambling for relevance that traps so many in their final chapters. Your relationships also bear the mark of this freedom. Because you never built them on the fragile ground of image management, they are able to withstand the changes of time. Friends who have walked with you for decades know that you did not spend your years performing for them, but being with them. Family members remember you not as someone always explaining, justifying, or polishing your reputation, but as someone who stood steady regardless of gossip, misinterpretation, or shifting trends. When your presence is recalled, it is with the respect given to someone who lived on their own terms. And then there is your legacy. This is a word often twisted by the culture of proving oneself, as if legacy were just another kind of applause, one that comes after you are gone. But the Stoic sees legacy differently. It is not about the size of the audience that remembers you, but the truth of what they remember. It is about whether you left behind work worth continuing, principles worth following, and an example worth considering. The absence of a performance means that what remains is unembellished. It is the real shape of your life, with all its flaws and virtues, standing honestly in the memory of those who knew you. Perhaps the most profound part of this long arc is the peace it gives you at the very end. When the final days come, you will not be lying there wondering how the world will interpret your story. You will not be anxious about whether you were admired enough, celebrated enough, seen in the right light. You will know, with the clarity that only a lifetime of practice can bring, that the measure of your life was never theirs to decide. And in that knowledge, you will find that even the fear of death loses much of its grip, because a life lived without constant performance is a life already lived in truth, and nothing essential can be taken from it. To live without proving yourself is not merely a personal comfort, it is a gift to those who come after you. It offers them an example of what it looks like to step off the exhausting stage and live from a place of integrity and self-respect. It shows them that it is possible to be ambitious without being enslaved to recognition, to love deeply without clinging for validation, to lead without needing applause, to fail without crumbling under shame. In a world where most people are still trapped in the theater of proving themselves, such an example is rare and therefore all the more valuable. So the long arc of freedom bends toward this, a life that, from beginning to end, remains your own. Not borrowed from the opinions of others, not leased out to the expectations of the crowd, not altered to fit the passing fashions of approval. Your life becomes, in the truest sense, a singular work, shaped by your own hands, guided by your own mind, and judged only by the measure of what you know to be right. And when it is done, it will not need defending, because it will have been lived in such a way that the truth of it stands without argument. If there is one thing the Stoics understood better than most, it is that the truest strength is often invisible. The world rewards the loud, the flashy, the constantly visible performers who live in the marketplace of attention. But beneath the noise, there is another way of being, a way that does not require constant demonstration or explanation. And once you have stepped into that way of life, you will find that what you thought was strength The ability to argue every point, win every debate, and protect every sliver of your image was really just a cage built from fear. To stop proving yourself is to unlock that cage. But what you find outside it is not an open battlefield where you must fight for survival. It is a wide, quiet field where you can finally breathe. The silence feels strange at first. Without the constant hum of monitoring how you are seen, you may mistake it for absence, even for emptiness. But over time, you begin to see that the quiet is not hollow. It is full. Full of the things you never had space for before: reflection, deep focus, genuine connection, the slow growth of things that matter more than your reputation. And here is the paradox. When you live without trying to prove yourself, you often end up proving more than you ever could through performance. Not because you have made some strategic move to appear humble, but because your life begins to carry the weight of consistency. People may not agree with you, but they will sense that you are not swayed by every passing wind. They may not praise you, but they will notice that you act the same in public as in private. You will become, perhaps without intending it, the kind of person whose steadiness is its own quiet proof. The Stoic does not live this way to impress. He lives this way because it is the only way to live free. When you need to prove yourself, you are always one opinion away from crisis. Your self-respect is at the mercy of gossip, misunderstanding, or the mood of the crowd. But when you live by your own compass, none of these things can touch the core of who you are. You can be praised without swelling, criticized without shrinking, ignored without disappearing. Your value does not fluctuate with the market price of public opinion. This does not mean you become closed off or unreachable. On the contrary, when you are no longer desperate for validation, you can be more open, because you are not entering every interaction with an agenda to win approval. You can listen without preparing your rebuttal. You can admit when you are wrong without fearing that it will erase your worth. You can let others have the last word without feeling diminished. This openness is not weakness. It is the flexibility of someone rooted deeply enough to bend without breaking. In the end, the choice to stop proving yourself is the choice to live in reality rather than in the theater of perception. Reality is quieter, less dramatic, but far more stable. In reality, your worth is measured by the truth of your actions, not by their reception. In reality, your dignity is not a mask you put on for an audience. It is the natural posture of someone who stands by what they believe, even when no one is watching. The ancient Stoics often used the metaphor of the inner citadel, a stronghold within the self that cannot be breached by the outside world. To stop proving yourself is to begin building that citadel brick by brick. Every time you choose not to defend your image unnecessarily, you lay another stone. Every time you act according to principle instead of popularity, you reinforce the walls. Every time you refuse to be pulled into the exhausting cycle of explanation and justification, you strengthen the gates. And one day, without realizing it, you will look around and see that you are no longer living exposed on the battlefield of other people's opinions. You are within your own walls, not imprisoned but protected, and free to move through the world on your own terms. Imagine then the life that grows from this place. Your mornings are not rushed with the mental rehearsal of how you will present yourself to the world. Your conversations are not burdened with hidden strategies to secure approval. Your decisions are not distorted by the question of who will agree with them. You walk into rooms without scanning for allies and leave them without tallying who was impressed. You live simply and directly, and in doing so, you give others permission, whether they realize it or not, to consider living the same way. And when the day finally comes that you must leave this life, there will be no panic over how you are remembered. You will know that the memory others carry is not something you could have scripted. You will trust that the life you lived was whole in itself, whether praised, ignored, or misunderstood. You will leave behind something more enduring than an image. You will leave behind a way of being, a pattern of freedom that cannot be erased by time or tarnished by rumor. That is the gift of stopping the endless project of proving yourself. You return to living. You stop running a campaign for an office you never needed to hold. You stop polishing a statue that will eventually crumble. You start using your strength for the things that matter. Acts of justice, moments of compassion, the pursuit of wisdom, the building of something that will outlast the shallow rise and fall of your public image. And so the Stoic walks on, unhurried, unshaken, unbent by the need to be approved of. The noise of the marketplace hums around him, but it does not enter the citadel. The opinions of others rise and fall like the tide, but within his walls the ground is steady. He knows, as you now know, that the greatest proof you can offer is to live so well that no proof is necessary.